Chairman, Mr. Secretary and General Milley, there's been a lot of reporting about the reduction in funding for the Virginia-class submarine in connection with the NNSA's budget increase. Critics of nuclear modernization are equating concern for the Navy's shipbuilding plan with opposition to funding the NNSA and are using some recent comments made by Acting Secretary Modley and also you, General Milley, to suggest that DOD does not support the current budget request for NNSA. Now, I share the concern for the Navy's shipbuilding budget, and Congress will have an opportunity to look at that. But I know that you are both very strong supporters of nuclear modernization. And also Admiral Richard was before this committee when he was here several weeks ago testifying that there was no excess margin in the NNSA's budget. So I just want to be clear on this. Do you both support the requested level of funding for nuclear modernization at the NNSA?
Senator, I do, and if you don't mind, I'll give a little bit of explanation. I think it's vitally critical that we recapitalize our nuclear triad. That's why we placed that as #1 defense priority in terms of our funding. That means not just the platforms, the B-21, the ground-based strategic deterrent, and the Columbia-class submarine, but also nuclear command control and a few other things like long-range strike. But you also have to have the packages, the warheads, et cetera, the plutonium pits to go with that. So it's critical that those be funded and moved quickly forward so we can have them paired up in time to recapitalize and ensure that the strategic deterrent is modern by the year, beginning in the year 2030.
And there's no room for pausing
the
production.
There is no room for margin. I've been working with our folks at OSD and Admiral Richard to try and actually build margin into our current fleet so that we have some room. But it's critical that we meet that timeline.
Okay. General Milley.
And I absolutely support fully funding the nuclear enterprise. I absolutely support fully funding the nuclear enterprise. It's the #1 priority. It's kept the peace, world peace, actually, from great power war for going on 7.5 decades. So I absolutely support that. I think what we're talking about is the Hask's testimony from last week. I was not involved in the decision to move the money from the SSN, but I fully support fully funding our nuclear enterprise.
Thank you. I think it's important that the record reflect that. Mr. Secretary, Section 1039 of the 2013 NDAA requires the Nuclear Weapons Council to certify NNSA's budget and ensure it's adequate to meet requirements. Conferees clearly stated in the accompanying report their expectation that through this provision, the Nuclear Weapons Council will, quote, take an active role in shaping and reviewing the NNSA budget as it is prepared for submission to Congress and negotiated with the Office of Management and Budget during the budget review process, end quote. This year, the certification letter submitted pursuant to this provision read, quote, NNSA is unable to provide detailed budget information to support certification in advance of the budget release of the President's fiscal year 2021 budget request by the Office of Management and Budget. The NWC cannot perform the analysis required to produce a budget certification letter without this information, end quote. I think it's obvious that the process is not working. But what is your view of the situation, and how can we resolve this to ensure the intent of the provision is being met?
Senator, I completely agree. I think we need to let the Nuclear Weapons Council work. I think that looking at budgets needs to begin very, very early, arguably in the late summer of the year before. I would like to have a look at that as well. I want to make sure that we're prioritizing the right things so that we have a capable strategic deterrent. I think if that were the case, then we would have been in a much different situation. We've already got agreement from NNSA to do that in DOE, and I got agreement also from OMB to support us on that. So I think it's very important, and we intend to implement that going forward.
Thank you. As you stated earlier, this has to work together. It has to be on time in order to meet our #1 priority of the NDS. Also, Mr. Secretary, in the time since the budget was released, we've heard complaints, including many here in Congress, about things that either weren't included or were perceived to be underfunded in this budget. Ships, aerial refueling tankers, stars and stripes, rumors about a withdrawal from Africa, the European Deterrence Initiative, the list goes on and on. You've heard those. What's forgotten sometimes is that it is Congress that sets the funding level, not the administration. So, Mr. Secretary, is it fair to say that these trade-offs are the result of the lower top line that was approved by Congress?
They are, Senator. I would still scrub my budget really hard year after year regardless, because I think it's necessary to do defense-wide reviews. But as the chairman mentioned up front, we have to get back on the trajectory of 3 to 5% annual real growth if we're going to modernize the force and implement the NDS. I was shown a number a few days ago that if you to go back to the Budget Control Act, I think it was August 2011, and the amount of funding we would have had if we hadn't gone that course, it's somewhere between $450 to $550 billion lost that we could have put into modernization. And so that's the catch-up we have to look at this point in time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Senator Shaheen.